I just watched an episode of the Tucker Carlson encounter on X. He was interviewing Dennis Quaid, who was promoting a new documentary film he narrates called Grid Down, Power Up. This documentary highlights the frailty of our electrically powered infrastructure and how it can be exploited, making it the Achilles heel of our society. And this interview got me thinking about a couple of things. First, the possibility of a massive shift from a technology-based society to a pre-industrial one. But more importantly, I thought about how human beings, well, especially Americans, seem to be indifferent to the possibility of a global catastrophe like the loss of the entire electrical grid. Most of the time, the prevailing attitude is it's the government's responsibility. This appears to be enough to silence the voices in people's heads that scream they are half a step away from tumbling into the precipice of extinction. In this episode of Office of the Patriot, I'll highlight some of the points in the interview, as well as investigate why many Americans appear to be comfortable with deferring their survival to chance and the United States government. Hello, and welcome to the Office of the Patriot. In this office, I try to make sense out of the nonsense of the progressive left and Rhino right. If you are a subscriber, thank you for your continued viewership. It is appreciated. If you are a returning viewer, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any future presentations. And if you were a first-time visitor to my channel, well, congratulations on finding it. It's usually hidden very well by the YouTube algorithm. However, I do hope you find the content worth coming back for. My name is Myron Ybarra, and I'm your host. No power source has had a greater impact on technological advancement and our day-to-day comfort in the United States than electricity. However, electrical power didn't become commonplace in the home until the mid-1940s, and it wasn't until the mid-1960s that virtually every home in the United States had access to electric power. Sure, gasoline is important for transportation, and natural gas and coal provide heat for our homes in the winter, but electricity rules the roost in terms of day-to-day use. Most people wake up and go to sleep using devices powered by electricity. So what happens when this modern marvel of convenience is no longer available to us? You say it can't happen. Well, it can, and according to the award-winning documentary Grid Down, Power Up, the likelihood is about 100% that it'll happen again.
If that happened, if huge parts of the United States had no power for a year, that'd be an extinction event for a while.
They've done a study, and 90% of the population would be dead within a year. During this Carrington event, one thing, we didn't rely on electricity, and everybody had a cow if you wanted milk, and you had a horse if you wanted to drive. Your car wouldn't work. What do? Your telephone doesn't work. There's no way to inform the public about,
Anything.
So you kind of messed up.
So
that's right. Again, I'm referring to what's known as a Carrington event. A Carrington event is a large solar storm that catapults magnetized plasma from the sun's corona, the outer layer of the sun, towards the Earth. Scientists predict that this type of solar storm occurs approximately once every century. The last one occurred in the 1800s, well before our dependence on electricity was established, so the effects were not as dire as they would be today, and it only lasted a little over a week. The primary casualty was the telegraph, our most technologically advanced method of communication at the time, and it required an almost complete replacement throughout the United States. Telegraph machines of that era used copper wire, iron, silk, and magnets, making them analog systems, which are much more resistant than our current digital hardware to electromagnetic surges of a Carrington event or an EMP. In some instances, telegraph operators reported receiving shocks from their telegraph keys. Some also reported sparks shooting from their telegraph receivers and transmitters that started fires all throughout the United States. To understand how serious of an issue a Carrington event or EMP really is, you only need remember how you were inconvenienced when you may have had some moron run into an electrical pole or transformer with their car and it knocked out power in your area for a few hours. You may have lost some of your food in your refrigerator or freezer, or you had to jump into your car to stay cool. Now, move this inconvenience to a nationwide scale and extend the duration from hours to months or years, and you have the makings of a full reset of society. Something like this has already happened in the United States in a very small scale. In 2003, a massive power outage impacted a number of northeastern states and part of Canada. The result was a complete blackout that lasted 2 days. Just 2 days. And in those 2 days, life basically came to a standstill in most major cities. Elevators, subways, water pumps, heaters, air conditioning, traffic lights, radio, all stopped functioning. All told, 50 million people were affected by this blackout, and as a result of this incident, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, established safeguards that energy providers were mandated to comply with and were enforceable by law as part of the Energy Policy Act of 2005. But in reality, these safeguards aren't enough. They're not enough to protect against incidents like a Carrington event, a man-made EMP, or even terrorist attacks.
Well, that's shocking.
Yeah, so
bit of information.
That really lifts your day, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, it's just I'm adding that to the Armageddon file that's growing.
Nobody's really talking about it, and in fact, President Trump actually signed an executive order to harden our grid to protect ourselves against an event like this happening. Obama tried to get that going as well, and it's stuck in these regulatory agencies that and lobbyists, because money needs to be spent. Most of our grid power companies are privately owned, and you can understand them not wanting to spend money on something that might occur. But this is definitely going to occur.
So, if scientists know that the likelihood is 100% that our grid will fail as a result of one of these events, which will change the way we lived for at least one generation, why are Americans seemingly indifferent to this possibility? Well, I believe it's for a few reasons. First, ignorance. It's in the government's best interest, especially the Democrat cabal that we have today, to keep the reality of our frailty of our electrical grid quiet. Having people know, at least the majority of people know, that in a minute and at best their lives will change forever, and in all likelihood they will not even survive, would cause a nationwide panic among those who rely on government for guidance and survival. And there are a lot of those people. Another reason is denial. People as a whole are incredulous about the possibility of losing technology. They believe, to their core, that technology will always keep Americans at least one step ahead of the end times. Our soft way of life over the last century has made most people believe this way. You've likely heard this idea expressed in another way: first world problems. This, unlike Americans who in the 1800s couldn't even dream of the luxuries or the first world problems we have today. Back then, food was either hunted for or sown by your own hands. Medicine to cure the common aches and pains a person experiences were based on natural remedies that were passed down generation to generation and ultimately lost to most people due to technology. And finally, we have apathy and the belief in the here and now. And I believe these are the biggest reasons for being unprepared. You can see this primarily in the attitude of young Americans. Many of them are still living with their parents well into their late 20s and early 30s, with the excuse that they can't make it out there because of X, Y, or Z. The reality is, the minute they earn it, they spend it. I've seen these Gen Z and millennials walk into Starbucks and enthusiastically plop down $20+ for a hot sandwich and a venti caramel macchiato with extra caramel drizzled down the inside of the cup, all the while being subsidized by their parents, the government, or both. They dismiss the need for putting $20 into savings or maybe even investing it for a rainy day. And this is what happens when people don't experience the pain of hardship and the joy of overcoming it on their own. I remember being in my 20s, having about $10 in my wallet and having to decide whether or not I should fill up my tank to get to work or grab a bite to eat because I was hungry. I solved the problem by getting 3 30-cent burgers, a 25-cent French fry, and a 50-cent Pepsi. The car got the rest. In truth, it's easy to be indifferent about most things that we can't control, but it's significantly more difficult to prepare for them when there's no incentive to do so, because many Americans today have been bailed out of trouble just about as many times as the big banks have. Given this, I believe that most Americans do not have the fortitude to survive even under the best of circumstances without the modern convenience of electricity. But maybe I'm being a little bit too pessimistic and unfair in my assessment. My wife, she thinks I'm getting prematurely crotchety. So it's also true that Americans as a whole are very resilient. They are compassionate to a fault and determined when the circumstances require it. And this, coupled with a modicum of preparedness, if the worst happens, maybe we will not only survive the loss of our technological way of life, but we will thrive and come away stronger. This concludes today's presentation of Office of the Patriot. If you enjoyed the content, please take the time to like, subscribe, and share my channel on your social media. It is appreciated. Also, take the time to comment. Engagement is one of the major metrics YouTube employs in their search algorithms. The more people that like and comment, the more my channel comes up when content like mine is searched for. And as always, have a blessed day and stay safe out there.